Okay, hopefully you can hear me. The block height is 865634. You're listening to the one and only Art of Freedom, here every Monday, live on Spaces, to talk to some of the best artists around the world, and in this incredible revolutionary space we call Bitcoin art. Hope you're all doing really, really well. My name is Rebel Money, and as always, I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Flo. How's it going, Flo? How's it going, Flo? I think I can hear something, but I'm not sure if it's you or not. Are we having bad times on Spaces?
Can you hear me?
Yay, we can.
Okay, so it's very weird. It's like I cannot. It doesn't work if I touch the mic. So when it's off, it's actually on. But weird spaces stuff. um, I'm very good. How are you?
I'm alright. I'm just recovering after an epic Amsterdam, so you might hear in my voice is not 100%, and that's because when in Amsterdam, you got to do Amsterdam things. Modio was there. All right, Modio, how's it going? Giving us a wave there. Love it. So yeah, it was a great time in Amsterdam. Amazing to meet all the artists that were there, all the incredible art that was there, including two of the pieces from our guest today. So it was a great event, and it keeps getting better year on year. So well done to Dennis and the BTC media team there for putting on a great event. And yeah, the gallery was front and center this time, right in the entrance, which was wonderful because it meant that everyone got a good view at Bitcoin culture. How's things in Chile?
Is very quiet and everything is nice. But before we go and we move on to the interview and all of that, I wanted to congratulate you, Rebel, because all what I saw was amazing, an amazing work. The masks were incredible, and the pictures are amazing, super well done piece, and all the work you did there. I think it's always pushing the boundaries of how these galleries and exhibitions are getting better and better. And I thank you for that because that helps us all in the space.
It's just I don't know what to say to that, Flo. It's awesome. Thank you very much. Appreciate that, especially from a fellow artist, honestly, and someone I respect a lot. So thank you so much. Yeah, it was great. We was just made great by all the art there. Some incredible art out there. So if you haven't this week, because we did a very off the cuff episode just midweek in the gallery with Bart, episode 29. So we snuck one in of 40 minutes talking about his incredible piece. It just blew me away. It's insane. So you should really check that out, everyone who's listening, if you haven't already. So yeah, all right. So without further ado, I think we should get on to the reason why everyone's listening today. It's not me and Flo nattering on. It's our incredible guest. And, we have a lot of art in the Bitcoin space, and it's growing and growing and growing. And every so often, you get artists that are improving and iterating and getting better in a certain art form. But every so often, you get an artist that comes along that you just think, what the hell is this? This is incredible. It's a completely new medium, a new form of expressing themselves in Bitcoin. And yeah, so I'm really I think that's, I'll leave it there because I don't want to spoil it for everyone, but I'd just like to welcome Fiat Fire. How you doing, sir?
Hey, thanks a lot. I just wanted to make sure that you can hear me. I have my microphone set up as my phone on top of a coffee cup. But but yeah, thanks a lot for having me. And I also just wanted to second what Florencia said. I saw the masks. Lots of photography of those masks are absolutely amazing. And really actually something I think that's different, that kind of stands out in this genre of Bitcoin art. So congratulations on that. It's a really something that stood out in the art at Amsterdam that I saw.
Thank you, sir. You'll be pleased to know that your sophisticated audio setup is working incredibly well. Um, and I need to now go and find myself. I've got a full coffee cup at the moment in front of me, so I might have to just drink it, and then slowly my sound will get better then towards the end of
Cheers.
the actual episode. So I think I've kind of built it up now, and I've kind of I've put you on this pedestal now, my friend. I'm really sorry about that, but at the same time, I'm so excited to talk to you. Just to give a brief kind of history and how I found out about you. Dennis was on the show about a month and a half ago, something like that, the curator of Amsterdam. And, you know, Dennis being Dennis, the curator, he kind of just invited you up to the mic and just to explain a little bit of your story. And I'm sure some of the listeners that are in here today were like, were as shocked as I was just listening to 10 minutes. I was like, right, we've got to get this guy back and talk to him about his art. So, how would you describe your art to as someone who hasn't seen or heard of it before?
Yeah. First, that that's true that Dennis. I I came into contact with Dennis about a year ago, just a couple of months before Bitcoin Miami, and I have to say that meeting Dennis and some of the talks that we've had about about different things in Bitcoin, and I think that he actually reached out to me. Some of my art was online, and it's just been great meeting him, and it's really it's really helped me out in a lot of ways. But as far as my art, it's like I never really started referring to myself as an artist until about 3 years ago, I guess. And the way that I got the the way that I got into the art is that I've always wanted to do something that's political, something that kind of has, meaning in terms of the way that we live in society and interact with power structures. The first thing that I ever did was I was working at an agency, and me and another guy had this idea. We were, I guess, really angered by what was going on in the world in terms of the U.S. preparing to go to war in Iraq. If you remember that thing, it was something where Colin Powell went to the UN and really gave some false information about Iraq having nuclear weapons. And there were a couple of things that came out of that. One is, prior to that war, I guess, and I guess this was like kind of in Afghanistan, is that there were images traditionally, when American soldier would die, there would be a video footage of like that coffin coming back to the US. And, usually the coffin would have an American flag draped on it. Well, during that time, George W. Bush, made an executive order that there would no longer be media coverage of those things. And so the media coverage of that kind of thing is something that's critical in a society that has free speech, for the population to decide whether they want to be part of a war or not. And so we came up with this idea of assembling 1,000 of these kind of makeshift coffins and having them draped with the American flag. And we made a procession of those coffins, and this is like, you kind of reach out to people, you create a kind of social media thing to get people involved. And with that procession, you really did show these, these flags and in what was being sort of censored to a worldwide audience. And so the next day that was covered in newspapers all around the world, China, um, all of the Western European countries. I remember seeing papers in Australia. And I never considered that to be a part of an artwork. Um, it was just kind of like an idea that I had. And so years went by of trying to do similar things like that. And I guess, in the last, maybe 10 years, I've encountered, Bitcoin, and I begin to see that kind of an issue, the issue of censorship and the issue of, the US military and wars those things were actually tied together. And that was a big revelation for me. And so when I kind of saw the potential of art on chain with NFTs, with Ethereum, and then ordinals kind of exploding, I sort of saw a role for myself in the art world, a way of kind of marrying up some of my philosophical ideas with art. And so a lot of the art that I started to do around that time was the name Fiat Fire kind of sounds a little bit on the nose, because I began just creating images almost in a really childlike fascination with arson kind of a way of just burning, different kinds of money. And then that's expanded a little bit into multimedia things. Some of the art is photography, some of the art is AI manipulation printed on a canvas, which was the pieces that I had in the Death by Fiat series that was shown in Amsterdam and Nashville. And then another part of it has been these performance pieces that involve banks, that I think that we talked about last time. So I've always liked the idea of not having any particular kind of media for art, but just for it to be driven by the ideas. And I'm not good at executing any of these pieces, but I do like where I'm going, and I do have a lot of confidence um, in the ideas, and that's what I want to keep on doing, and that's my real purpose about making this kind of art.
That's really interesting, and that underlying protest is definitely a key part of your work, and a key. Well, it's to be honest with you, your work is in a really really good way incredibly shocking, and that's what I particularly love about your work. Is it literally just gives me a giant kick up the backside every time I'm looking at it. Um, it literally my senses just from the way from from the message, the medium, etc. And that's what makes it so exciting and fresh. I think. Should we start with? Let's start. Well, I don't know. Where would you like to start, with your performance pieces or with your gallery pieces?
Um, let me start with some of those gallery pieces, that Death by Fiat series. Like I was saying, the first thing that I kind of started with, the pieces that were in Bitcoin Miami, were some. It's just kind of like instinctual, without any real narrative plan, is to burn some money, try to create some beautiful photography. But that sort of was abandoned at some point. The idea of just doing something kind of for aesthetic reasons, I think, was abandoned pretty quickly. And I moved on to these other things, and that Death by Fiat series, I think, is a result of that. And I think the idea of kind of shocking, creating something that's shocking and arresting, it really comes from a place of not starting out. Sorry if you hear the sirens in the background. I'm in just a regular day in New York here. It comes from not like starting out with the idea of creating something that's shocking. I'm glad, obviously that it created that effect, but it's kind of a place of natural, coming from a place of natural anxiety about the world that we live in, about um, just living, living life in, in this kind of fiat economy. um the I'll just describe, some of the pieces, if people in the audience haven't seen them. um the first three pieces that were in Bitcoin Nashville, they're kind of paintings that are in the style of maybe uh Hopper, or really, really, there's a guy that I think everybody knows here, and I talked with him about these pieces, Delta Sauce. They kind of depict, I think, kind of a contemporary but almost nostalgic um, portrayal of life in Western society in America, of contemporary life. But they also include depictions of suicide. Um, so the first one, the first one in the series was a portrayal of someone kind of in their home office, and I kind of imagine this is somebody who lived like in the northeastern United States, and it's fall, and they've got this home office where they've been doing some investments, some casual day trading, and you see that office, and then you see the guy hanging from above a pile of cash, and it's called Currency Trader. Um, there's another one of a guy in his garage with a really nice car, and the dashboard has some labels that read inflation, and that's very high. Hours worked, and that's very high. There are needles that are kind of redlining, and savings, like kind of gas tank, that's very, very low. And that one's called Control. And those depictions of suicide, it's very shocking, but that really, comes out of my own kind of experience of wondering, where I'm going to end up in life, if I'm going to have enough, you know, savings to kind of retire on, kind of um, thinking that you're working so much and never, having enough time for living life. That kind of feeling of the death of a salesman, of Willie Loman, of that that quote from uh, that quote about men living lives of quiet desperation. Um, and I see, people in my family, people in my neighborhood, um, men who live their lives working, but never really know, where it's going. And you see a lot of people who are not involved in in crypto who haven't kind of made the discovery about Bitcoin or anything like that, but they're living out the same narrative that a lot of people in the space talk about. Um, so that's where those pictures came from. Something really personal. Um, I'm a father. I have a couple of boys. That sometimes I wonder where their life is heading. I can see that there's anxiety from them about that. Where do you fit into an economy? um, and it's just something that's affected me every day of my life. Feeling like, where are you going to fit in? What's what's the end going to be like? Um, do you? I think a lot of people feel like they're living lives that are out of control. And in all of these pictures of these suicides, there's another one of a guy, somebody's arm that's laying on a table, and there's a prescription bottle, and the prescription bottle, the prescriber on the bottle is Dr. Powell, and the generic name is monetary manipulation, and the number is a somewhat uh, low, relatively low compared to global rates of 9% inflation. But as everybody here knows, that can have an enormous effect on people's lives. Um, but that's where those pictures come from. Is from just my own anxiety of how our lives can end, and the idea that those people actually are experiencing a moment of control over that chaos.
Wow, that's incredibly powerful. And I don't mind saying this, as a person who's has gone down some very dark places, to near to the point where I thought about taking my own life. Um, having art in my life, and then also having then so art was the first step, and having Bitcoin then as the second step has provided me with a lot more hope around my life. And I can honestly, and I feel like looking at those pictures now, um, I can see how it would, the fiat system does take you down to an incredibly dark place where it beats you down so heavy that that people do horrible things. So and yeah, the depiction and how you've set it up, I think, whilst being incredibly dark, is incredibly clever, and really genuinely hits home. And that's what's so great about your work, is that you are getting that feeling across. Have you had any previous experience of making these types of paintings before? Was it just literally this is the first time that you've kind of come up with this type of theme?
No, yeah, this was the first time. Some of the tools with AI helped me to do that. I I moved to New York about 20 years ago, and became a kind of big fan of contemporary art, and really made that just part of my kind of routine of going to see work at galleries, and kind of educated myself on the history of 20th century painting and things like that, and never had any idea that I would ever be able to use that, or participate in any way in kind of that conversation of art. But the ability to take some of my own ideas and use some of those references, it's just really, really satisfying to have seen artwork that my eye, is drawn to, and just sort of use that texture to tell a story that's really important to me has been great.
I can you hear me, guys? Because I've been having some problem.
Yes.
Okay, cool. I just want to say that just looking by these pictures, when I first saw them, is impressive how they call your attention immediately. So well executed. I definitely see these influences of painters you were mentioning, and something that I find very special about your art in general, not only these images we're talking about now, is that it's very you're talking about very hard things, that are like not positive in a way, but you talk about them in such an elegant and with so much beauty that I think that's so important to communicate, to really communicate the message, because they don't pull you away, they are intriguing, and they are complex, and I find that very hard in general to like for me. Well, going through your site was amazing. Like, I enjoyed, because we usually do this, like I of course, the first time we talked, I was intrigued, so I saw some of your work, and then preparing for today, I went in again, like, to try to see more of your work, and it was amazing for me how the pieces are so different in a way, like you explore different things, but also super connected, and also like through the aesthetics, not just like by the theme of the Fiat, by other things. And yeah, I find that particularly like interesting, and very hard to execute as an artist. And also, yeah, it's in I think I don't know if all, but most of us, or many of us, have experienced this feeling of despair that's in Fiat culture, and it's so special when you find hope, like for example in Bitcoin, and it's hope that's is like sustained, like it's based on a real thing. It's not just like, oh, I'm gonna be happy and optimistic and just living my world of ideas. It's like I have ground where I can stand that makes me have hope. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I really appreciate that. It's I think in a lot of ways it's maybe easier sometimes to um, explore the darkness and sort of explore the problem. Um, there's just a lot more kind of interesting content in that area than things that are just kind of beautiful and more positive. And the 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 whole sort of community of Bitcoin and the ideas of Bitcoin are extremely um, optimistic, and there's it just puts you, I think, in a better place. And I think sometimes being in that better place, it's more difficult to create art about positive things than it is about negative things. So sometimes I give myself that as a criticism that I'm doing something that's um, narratively a little bit easier in going down the dark path. But I'm also, uh, the idea that the aesthetics work for you, just makes me really happy, gives me a good feeling. So I appreciate that.
You are listening to The Art of Freedom here every Monday night with Rebel Flow, joined by Fiat Fire, who's just talking us through his story and his art. If you really want to contribute to the show live, you can in one of two ways. You can either ask to speak and we'll get you on live here. Secondary, you can leave a comment in the bottom right hand corner. And we've got BTC Aloha saying such an inspiring show. Thank you so much for that. Really appreciate that, and really appreciate you tuning in every week as well. So uh, Fiat Fire, let's talk. Let's switch it around a bit now to some of your let's say performance art. It's the best way to describe it. But this is what, you know, you had your visual pieces there, which are incredibly striking. But truly, this is what kind of blew me away, is your performance Bitcoin art. And I think you're a real pioneer in this space. And I think is a space that's going to grow because it's so freaking cool. So can you, I don't want to spoil it again. Like, could you just take us through some of your performance art, and then we'll try and get some links as well if anyone wants to see or hear some of this stuff in the bottom right hand corner if you click on the comments there. But yeah, tell us a little bit about your performance pieces.
Sure. I, again, I think getting into this, I was searching for some ways to, kind of connect the dots between things that I was thinking about, politically, and in the art world. And there were a few performance pieces or performance artists that really kind of inspired me. One was Marina Abramovic, and then the other was Banksy. When I first moved to New York, there's a magazine in New York called The Village Voice. Is kind of like this great, really famous place where they have a lot of like film criticism and art criticism, and just like a nobody, you know, near to well, roaming the city, and I pick up this article one day, and it's this thing about this guy named Banksy, who I think was sort of an unknown at the time, going to the Metropolitan Museum and, kind of sneakily hanging up one of his pictures that stayed there for a couple of days. And I just, as soon as I saw that, it kind of put this seed that I wanted to do something, you know, like that one day, but never had any kind of context or channel to do that. And so, years later, while these ideas about the financial system are percolating, there were a number of things that just imagining like the inside of a bank is a canvas. And I've been wanting to do this for a couple of years, but it just recently happened that I have gone into a couple of banks so far, and have taken some existing fiat currency. In this case, I got a couple of packs of sequentially numbered dollar bills from 2009. So, obviously a really important, year in Bitcoin history, and also US financial history, in terms of that a couple of months before 2009 and 2008 was the banking crisis. I think everybody knows that in 2009, when the first blocks came out, that Satoshi had that message about the chancellor in England bailing out the banks. So this is all kind of fit together for me, to do this, to go into a bank. And I guess the idea at first was that I was going to go into a bank and kind of give a speech about the fiat system, and then throw this money, all over the customer service area. The money that I did this piece with, I had written on it, kind of painted on it, "Burn your money." So that's what floats through the air whenever I threw this. This particular piece that I just posted today, there's a little video of it. I did this in Austin, Texas, during the after the consensus conference there, and I had made some arrangements with people to video this, you know to video the event. And the night before the conference started, I had an Airbnb there in Austin. It was on 6th Street, which is where all the kind of action and the live music is in Austin. Well, my Airbnb was kind of at the far end of 6th Street, where the street intersects with, the huge highways and interstates. And I got to my place at about 9 p.m. and fell asleep, woke up at 2 in the morning, needed something to eat. The only place that was open was this kind of like convenience store that's on the other side of the interstate. And in the middle of that interstate, there's a bunch of brush and, trees and things like that. And there's a trail that goes through there with the convenience store on the other side. So I decided I'm just going to walk there. And while I'm down there in this, like, it's completely dark and there's just a bunch of trees around, I decided that I was going to practice my speech that I was going to do in the bank. And, I've never really been on a stage before. So the idea of kind of breaking the silence of the bank by getting up and saying these things about the fiat system was really scary. So I was, there lots of car noise in the background, and I'm shouting this because I figured you have to, get up the nerve to do it, and I start to shout this speech. So I do that, and I'm ready. I've contacted the people. There's some people in the sovereign community who are going to help me out with the video. But the night before, I got into an accident and I broke my jaw in a couple of places. I was in the hospital for about a week, and when I got out, the conference was over, so I didn't have that video help, and I had to find a new way a new way of giving that speech. So I used one of those text to speech programs. Excuse me. To write out, this thing that I was going to say in the banks in front of the customers and the tellers and the customer service people. And it basically was about, hey, this money that you have in your hand, this money that you have behind the counter, you know, this is not your money and it's not my money. So let's burn it and replace it with something new, Bitcoin. And it's kind of bizarre that somebody comes up to the window and holds up their cell phone, and has this computer voice says that it's almost saying these things out loud and disrupting that with your voice, obviously would have been it's almost like the beginning of a bank robbery, for somebody to do that. So this whole thing that happened with getting into this accident was kind of serendipitous because it allowed me to control that speech. I don't know if I could have gone through with it, to be honest. But when I held this up and this computer voice starts saying this, it really created this moment of confusion and disruption. You did hear the kind of chatter in the bank kind of, subside, and people really listened to that. Um, and I don't think that anybody, maybe maybe it hit a little bit saying that this is not your money, but the moment of confusion to me is kind of the art piece. The moment of, people wondering what's going on. And after I threw the teller kind of backs away from the window, and I think she reached under the counter, and some people that were in line kind of backing up a little bit as I threw this money. Um, I don't think that any of them saw the $2009 bills and, made any of those connections that would be obvious to the people, in the space. But I do think that something happened there, that there was some questioning of what happens in a bank, some questioning of why we have to wait in line to get your money out, why the bank is involved in these transactions. And people know a lot about the deficit situation, a little bit about the printing, the fact that the bank gets their money from from the Fed at a discounted rate, and then reloans it to other people at a higher rate. That all of the customers of a bank are essentially uh, retail customers. um, I think that some of that might have hit if it didn't hit right away, and that kind of moment is the art piece.
Wow, that's just incredible. I just love it. I, yeah, I'm just stunned by it. It's just so good. Like, listen, I've heard it once before. This is the second time I've heard this, and I'm still kind of like, this is incredible. This is one of the best things I've ever heard. So, I've put a little link in the below of actually the audio I believe is just released of what you had in the actual bank at the time. And is there any other way that it has been? So there was no actual video of you doing this other than on the bank security systems, which ironically could be could be where the art is now stored.
Let's see. Wait, hold on just a second, just a second.
Sure. You are listening to the Art of Freedom here. This is you listen to Fiat Fire. If you do want to get in touch with the show, you can head over to our Telegram group, and we'll give you a link to that. It's the Art of Freedom. It's where all the artists hang out. It's where all the collectors hang out. It's where all the people who really appreciate Bitcoin art hang out. And I'll put a link in the bottom right hand corner. Flo, did you have anything to say? Sorry.
Yeah, no, I wanted to just comment on, for me, the experience of going through Fiat's Fire work is so inspiring that every time that I go to his site, like I get a new idea, and that's unusual. Someone being so like, you are not only creating pieces, but there's something about your work that creates ideas, at least in my mind. And just wanted to take a moment to say that, because I really appreciate it.
Thank you. You were mentioning, Rebel. You were mentioning about the sound, and I. What happened was that when I was in the hospital, um, I didn't have anybody to shoot video at that point, and so at the last minute, I said, this is my last day in Austin. I'm going to leave the hospital and go back home. And so I said, I still want to do this. I still want to find some way to do this. So I put an ad in Craigslist for somebody to, shoot the video for me. And I found this guy who was really had a lot of experience. And he said, he said, I really understand where you're coming from with this, and I really want to help. This is great. So I'm I'm set up with this guy, and the next morning I'm checking out of the hospital, all this paperwork you have to do, and I call up the guy. There's no answer. I call him a couple times, no answer. Send him a kind of urgent text messages, and finally he gets back to me, and he says, yeah, man, I'm sorry, I just can't do it. My wife, thinks it's a horrible idea, and I've got kids. I just can't do it. So I started looking for some other people, and this is the morning of, and I found this older woman whose name was Octavia. She didn't really have any experience at all, but it's literally kind of somebody holding a cell phone. It said it could be done with an iPhone. Um, and so I met her before the the bank robbery, and she had brought along her daughter, who was a high school senior, whose name was also Octavia. And so she came into the bank with me. We all agreed that we would go and kind of sit down on the chairs and assess the situation before. But the video that she shot using a cell phone, she kind of turned it at this different angle. And then I think that she got a little bit nervous because you're holding, a cell phone in a bank. It makes you look like you're casing the bank. And then there were just a lot of people getting in the way, and she put it away down some point. So the video is kind of the actual video, the raw footage is kind of shaky and it's all over the place. Um, and the video that you see is not actually that's not actually security camera video. It's a still of the video that she took, and the security camera kind of texture of it is one to sort of like record the date and time that this actually occurred, that it was at a Bank of America branch, but also to kind of kind of give that contrast between the idea that growing up, and I know a lot of people, tons of people like this, have always loved bank robberies. Um, I don't know why. It's hard to understand, but most people that I know cheer for the bank robber. Um, and so the security footage was kind of like the idea of giving that contrast between what happens in an actual bank robbery, people coming in and taking the small amount of money that actually exists in banks, versus what was happening here, which was sort of me coming in and depositing some knowledge about the banking system, um, and just taking that idea of surveillance and turning it around. The bank's way of um, you know versus a guy doing this performance art piece in order to share his opinions about what's going on in the world.
I think it's beautiful, mate. Just pure poetry, and I think this whole thing should be turned into a movie in itself. It's such an incredible concept. Everything that went on. Get Octavia back in there as well, and little Octavia in as well. And it's just an incredible piece, and I'm so glad someone's done it. And it's yeah, it's one of my favorite Bitcoin art pieces. I think it's so insane, so brilliant, and so simple, all at once. And yeah, I'm glad Bitcoin art is maturing to a point where we're now getting these types of art where we are getting these hard hitting art. Do you think, like, in general, there needs to be more Bitcoin art that is kind of dealing with or has members of the general public in it? Because I think sometimes us as Bitcoiners, we can, or Bitcoin artists, we can be guilty of just giving Bitcoin art to Bitcoiners rather than the actual general public.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of the Bitcoin art exists is it's very important, I think, from a kind of, history standpoint. At some point 50 years from now, Bitcoin will be traditional finance. Bitcoin will be, what banks are today. Michael Saylor will have his bank, and, our kids will know and grandkids will know Bitcoin as the operating system of the world. And when that happens, having art from the beginning of when that happened, I think these are like really important artifacts, especially for the people that are in this now, to have something to say that, I was there, I was thinking about these things at that time. That is important, for sure. And having the galleries at these conferences, I think it's like culturally, sustaining and important. But at the same time, yes, it's important for us to have art that's is also not as self-referential, and it doesn't feel as much like, inside baseball, and kind of, reaches out more and more to that group of people that are, you know, the normies, that have these issues affecting their lives, but haven't kind of made any critical connection, um, with what's going on. And art can do that. Art can kind of get people thinking about things that they wouldn't have thought about before. And it's a lot easier uh, to do that than reading a white paper, right? I don't think it's necessary that everybody has to take the same course, um, into Bitcoin. I don't think it's necessary that everybody has to do that. I think that art can be a much quicker, easier way, for people to think about their lives.
Hey, Fiat Fire. So we have 4 minutes left, and before we go, and before you tell us about where people can find you and find more about your work, I would love to hear if you are planning on something new, if there's an upcoming project, and also if you have a recommendation you would give to the artist in the room.
I'm sorry, the last part of the question.
If you have a recommendation you would give to artists listening to us now, like anything you can, something you think might be helpful for us artists that we are in the same quest.
Gotcha. Um, so for one, this project, that I was just talking about with the uh, the bank invasion. Um, I've inscribed these on um, Block 9 Sats, and these will be available through Gamma next week. The actual, photographic images of each of the $1 bills that have Burn Your Money. Those will be available as inscriptions on Block 9s, from 2009. Um, as far as, any advice to any other artists, I would just say that we all have a passion about this that's pretty clear. And I think that this time, people always say that we're early, that we're in the first out of the first inning of the game. I I don't believe that. I believe that that time, no matter how long it is between now and more people adopting Bitcoin or becoming aware of the kind of way the world works. I don't think that you should ever think of it as we're being early and there's a lot of time, because you as an artist only have a certain amount of time in your life to do the things that you want to do. And I'm the worst person in the world to be saying this, because I'm the worst person at kind of like executing and doing the things that I need to do. But my advice to anyone, in life would be to spend every second of your free time uh, executing, you know, doing the things that you want to do. That's a that's that's something that's so obvious, but I'm giving advice to myself when I say that, and so I'm just like saying that out loud and sharing it with everybody else.
Thank you so much, because that really is good advice. And yeah, sometimes it happens like you feel, time is limited, but then I don't know, life happens, and yeah, you have to concentrate and give your best, I guess. Rebel, last thoughts.
Just one quick question. Can we expect any bank robberies or knowledge exchanges, as I, prefer to call them? Uh, can we expect any more of that in the future, and any performance pieces in the future?
I think so. These were done with $1 notes, and that's the lowest denomination. I would hope to kind of up the ante a little bit, hopefully with some $100 notes, because I think that really kind of gets the attention of people, right? I mean, $1 notes is something that you kind of see on the floor, and people just like walk by it sometimes, or you see on a on a stage at a nightclub. But I think getting that up to $100 notes, and these were banks that were kind of regional banks, and I would like to do it at a larger bank in a larger city, maybe even a federal bank. So yeah, I am definitely going to continue to do other pieces in this series.
I'm really excited for that. And if you happen to be in a bank in Wales and you need a photographer, I'm your man. Just call me up. All angles, that I won't get too nervous.
You,
It'll be
I,
great.
I hadn't thought about that actually, but I really like the idea of having you know other currencies be a part of this story, because a lot of this is focused, for obvious reasons, on U.S. currency, but the story of inflation and debasement happens everywhere, and so I really would like to do this in other countries as well.
Yeah, if you ever come to Latin America, I'm also offering. And what you say about that is crazy, because of course the dollar is like the world reserve currency. But for example, in my country, Chilean peso, we get double inflation, because at the end we get the dollar inflation and we also get our own inflation. So it really is, yeah, crazy.
All right. Well, I think our time is sadly up there. So just want to extend an incredible thank you to you for Fiat Fire for coming on today's show and sharing your incredible story, my friend. It's absolutely awesome. Just before we go, just where would people go and find out more about your artwork?
So I have a website, fiatfire.com. And also, like I say, that this series is going to be dropping on Gamma next week. And Rebel, thank you so much for this, for inviting me here. It's just been a real pleasure having this conversation.
It's been awesome. It's the best way to spend Monday nights, I tell you, mate. That was Fiat Fire. Join us today on the Art of Freedom 30. We're back every single week. This is it. Every single Monday night, you get your dose of Bitcoin art. And then next week, we're very fortunate to be joined by C is Medicine. So we've got Naomi on. Really looking forward to coming to talk to her. But I think that's it for today's show. All I've got to say is hope you have an awesome creative week, and go out and make something awesome. Flo, anything else?
Thank you guys. Thank you, Revel, and thank you, Fiat Fire, for sharing with us today.
See you next week.
Bye-bye.